She was mocked for her worn uniform, laughed at like she was nothing. But no one in that cafe knew the truth. The waitress, they insulted, was a CEO in disguise, quietly watching every move. And when the arrogant millionaire who sneered at her discovered who she really was, his world shattered. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The morning sun spilled across the downtown street, catching the smudged windows of Harper's Cafe, a small corner spot tucked between office buildings and boutiques. The place smelled faintly of burnt coffee and warm bread, its wooden floors creaking under hurried footsteps. For most customers, it was just another cafe, a stop before work or a place to gossip over lattes. But for Emily Rivera, it was a stage. She tied the strings of her faded apron behind her waist, smoothing down the wrinkles of her second-hand blouse. Her hair, pulled into a simple bun, had a few loose strands framing her face. To anyone looking, she was just another underpaid waitress, blending into the background. But beneath the modest clothes and tired shoes was a woman who could walk into any boardroom in the city and command silence. No one here knew that Emily Rivera was the CEO of Rivera Industries, one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. She had inherited the empire young, steering it with intelligence sharper than her rivals expected. But she had learned the hard way that wealth was a mask people clung to, and that respect tied to money wasn't respect at all. So she had created another mask, one far simpler. Here, in this cafe, she could test people, watch them reveal who they were when they thought she was no one. The morning rush was in full swing when a group of young professionals entered, their suits pressed, their laughter loud. They slid into a booth, snapping fingers for service without looking up from their phones. Emily approached with her notepad, offering her usual gentle smile. "What can I get for you?" she asked. One of the men glanced at her apron, his lip curling. "Maybe start with a new outfit. That uniform looks like it's seen better decades." The table erupted in laughter. Emily's smile faltered for a heartbeat, but she steadied it quickly, her pen poised. "Coffee then?" she prompted calmly. A woman in the group smirked, her designer handbag gleaming on the seat beside her. "Black coffee for me, and maybe she can manage not to spill it." Emily jotted it down, her face drained nothing. Inside, her stomach tightened. She had endured mockery before, in boardrooms, in whispers behind her back when she was young and untested. But it always stung, no matter how practiced her composure. The door opened again, the bell chiming, and a hush seemed to ripple through the group. A man stepped inside, tall and sharp in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the cafe's monthly rent. Adrian Cole. His reputation preceded him, a wealthy investor known for ruthless deals and an arrogance that filled any room he entered. He spotted the group and joined them, sliding into the booth with a self-assured grin. "Good morning," he drawled, glancing at Emily as though she were part of the furniture. "What's the joke?" The man beside him smirked. "Our waitress. Look at that uniform. Looks like she pulled it from a thrift store." Adrian's gaze swept over her slowly, his smirk deepening. "Uniform? I'd call it a relic. Surprised they even let staff dress like that. Presentation matters, doesn't it?" Laughter rolled around the table again. Emily's fingers tightened around her notepad, but her voice remained calm. "Coffee and pastries, then." Adrian leaned back, crossing his arms. "Tell me, do they pay you enough here to afford clothes that fit, or do you collect tips in sympathy?" The words were sharp, meant to wound, and the table roared with amusement. For a moment, Emily's composure cracked, a flicker of hurt flashing in her eyes. She wanted to lash back, to remind him that she could buy and sell his entire portfolio without blinking. But she swallowed it, burying the truth beneath the mask she wore. Her smile returned, faint but steady. "Coffee it is," she said softly, and turned away. As she walked toward the counter, her heart hammered. Humiliation prickled at her skin, but she forced herself to breathe. This was why she kept the disguise, to see who people really were when they thought she had nothing. Adrian Cole had just revealed himself, clearly. Powerful, entitled, dismissive of anyone he deemed beneath him. She placed the order calmly, ignoring the sympathetic glance from the barista. She wouldn't break here, not in front of them. When she returned with the tray, setting cups and plates down carefully, Adrian barely glanced at her, but something in her eyes caught his attention. Not submission, not shame, but quiet strength. She met his gaze evenly for a brief moment, her calm composure sharpened than any insult. Adrian looked away first, dismissing the flicker of discomfort in his chest. He had brushed it off, laughing with his companions, masking the strange tug her eyes had left behind. Minutes later, he rose, tossing bills onto the table with careless ease. "Keep the change," he said, his tone mocking as though the tip were charity. Then he turned, striding out of the cafe with his entourage. Emily gathered the cups silently, her face serene, but inside her resolve hardened. She had seen men like Adrian Cole all her life, men who measured worth in labels, who trampled dignity without a thought. She would not forget this, and one day soon, when the mask slipped and her truth came to light, Adrian would learn just how costly arrogance could be. The cafe quieted after Adrian and his companions left, but their laughter still clung to the walls like an odor that refused to fade. Emily wiped the booth carefully, her movements precise, as though erasing every trace of disdain left behind. A mother with a stroller caught her eye and mouthed thank you for the extra napkins. A delivery driver stopped to grab coffee on credit, promising to pay Friday. The barista gave her a sympathetic nod that said without words, "I saw, and I'm sorry." Emily drew strength from these small acts of decency, letting them soothe the sting of mockery. From the kitchen pass, Harper, the cafe's owner, leaned out with flour dusting her sleeves. "You all right, Em?" she asked, her voice pitched low so it wouldn't carry. Harper had a habit of noticing more than she let on. Emily tipped water into glasses, watching the liquid tremble before settling. "Fine," she said evenly. It wasn't the first time strangers measured her worth in clothes and seams, and it wouldn't be the last. Anonymity came with a price, and she had chosen to pay it. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, the reminder disguised as a recipe alert. She dismissed it quickly. Board call at noon. She'd take it later, standing in the alley behind the cafe, earbuds tucked beneath her hair, while trucks rattled past. No one here needed to know that the same woman who stacked sugar packets also approved budgets large enough to change hundreds of lives. By 10 o'clock, the rush began to thin. Emily slid a tray of blueberry scones into the display case. A man in work boots fumbled for coins to pay for his coffee. Without a word, Emily tucked a scone into his bag and scribbled, "On the house," on the receipt. She believed kindness wasn't charity, it was respect, paid forward in small, steady gestures. Still, as she wiped the counter, Adrian's face intruded like a shadow she couldn't shake. He had looked at her as though she were invisible, but there had been a flicker when their eyes met, a pause, brief but telling. He had looked away first. She filed that detail alongside others she had learned to notice. The twitch of his mouth when his laughter was forced, the gleam of his watch, the studied looseness of his tie, arrogance draped in silk, but with cracks if one knew where to look. At 11:30, Emily stepped into the alley, slipping earbuds in to join her board meeting. Her voice was calm, professional, even as delivery trucks sputtered nearby. When a junior executive suggested cutting a mentorship program to offset delays, Emily answered without hesitation. "We don't save today by mortgaging tomorrow," she said, outlining a solution that spared jobs while balancing numbers. They accepted her decision, unaware that their CEO was leaning against a brick wall, apron still tied, pigeons pecking near her feet. Power didn't need velvet offices to carry weight. Back inside, the cafe smelled of cinnamon and rain beginning to tap the windows. Emily tidied the sugar jars, smoothed menus, and placed daisies into a vase on the least desirable table, the one by the drafty vent. Details mattered. Quiet acts rearranged spaces more than grand gestures ever could. Later, while sweeping under the booth where Adrian had sat, her broom brushed against something hard. She bent down and found a business card wedged between the cushions. Adrian Cole, Cole Strategic Holdings. The embossed letters gleamed expensively under the light. She turned it over. A scrawled note in ink read, "Call him. He buys rounds." She almost laughed, a soft, startled sound before tucking the card into the register drawer. Not as a keepsake, but but as a reminder. Near closing, the cafe door opened, and a girl in a thrifted jacket stepped inside, her cheeks pink from the cold. Two girls in glossy shoes followed, whispering just loud enough to cut. Emily saw the way the girl's shoulders hunched, the way humiliation burned on her face. Emily left the counter, her steps unhurried. She guided the girl to a window seat, placing water before her without being asked. When the whispers turned sharper, Emily met the glossy shoes with calm eyes and said, "Here, we measure people by warmth, not labels." The laughter faltered, brittle as glass, before the girls turned away. The girl in the thrifted jacket blinked hard, gratitude flooding her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Emily set a steaming mug between her hands, the curl of heat rising like a shield. "You're safe," she said softly, and meant it. She returned to the counter, her chest steady now. Outside, the rain eased into a mist, the streetlights switching on early, gilding the glass with gold. Somewhere out there, Adrian Cole was probably recounting his day in another expensive room, forgetting her completely. But Emily hadn't forgotten him. Not his insult, not his laughter, and certainly not the way he'd flinched, however briefly, when he realized she hadn't bowed her head. That detail alone told her something important. Adrian Cole was a man who believed he could see through people. He had no idea the woman he mocked was already watching him from behind another mask, one that would soon shatter his certainty. By the time Emily Rivera left Harper's Cafe that night, the rain had stopped and the city glittered in damp reflections. She walked briskly down the block, her worn shoes slapping against the pavement, her modest coat pulled tight against the wind. To anyone watching, she was just another tired waitress heading home. But a black car idled quietly near the corner, its driver stepping out to open the door as she approached. Emily gave a small nod, slipping inside. The city blurred past as the car climbed toward the hills, where glass towers and penthouses gleamed like watchful guardians. When the elevator doors opened at the top floor of Rivera Tower, the transformation was complete. Emily stepped into her penthouse, a sleek, expansive space of marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. City lights sprawled below like scattered diamonds. Her coat slid off her shoulders, revealing the silk blouse beneath. She loosened her bun, and waves of dark hair tumbled with her other life, her real life. Emily Rivera was not a waitress. She was the CEO of Rivera Industries, a company she had inherited after her father's death and rebuilt with her own hands. Under her leadership, the firm had grown into a quiet powerhouse in renewable technology and urban development. Yet she had deliberately kept her identity private, appearing rarely in the press, preferring anonymity to fame. The reason was simple. She had learned early that wealth was a magnet, for envy, for lies, for people who saw her as a wallet rather than a woman. Pretending to be ordinary was her way of protecting herself, of testing those around her. If people could respect her in an apron, then maybe they were worth keeping close. She poured herself a glass of water and walked across the room to the balcony. The city stretched endlessly below, alive with light and noise. She thought of Adrian Cole, of the way he had marked her clothes without hesitation. It wasn't the first time someone had measured her worth in fabric, but the sting lingered, sharper because he had looked at her with such certainty, as though his money made him an authority on her soul. Emily set the glass down firmly. Adrian Cole was not the first arrogant man she had encountered, and he would not be the last. But she made a mental note: remember him. Across town, Adrian sat in his own penthouse suite, the opposite of Emily's warmth. His world was all steel and glass, cold lines and spotless surfaces. He poured himself a drink, reviewing the day's deals on his laptop. His empire was built on calculated risks, aggressive takeovers, and a reputation for never blinking. People feared him in boardrooms, and he thrived on that fear. He thought briefly of the cafe that morning, of the waitress with the faded apron. He had joined in the laughter, mocking her, but later, when the others weren't looking, he remembered her eyes. Calm, unyielding, almost daring him to look deeper. It unsettled him, though he would never admit it. To Adrian, the world was divided between sharks and prey, and he refused to be anything but the former. On Emily's desk lay a folder of invitations. She flipped through them absently, discarding most. One caught her eye: the annual Harrison Foundation Gala, a gathering of the city's most powerful investors and executives. She had intended to attend quietly, reveal herself only to a select few partners. But as she scanned the list of expected guests, her lips curved faintly. Adrian Cole, of course. Fate, it seemed, was arranging its stage. The gala invitation remained on Emily's desk long after midnight, its gold lettering catching the glow of the city lights. She traced her fingers over the embossed emblem, her thoughts circling. These gatherings had always been more performance than substance. A parade of egos, alliances struck over champagne, deal whispered between courses. But this year would be different. This year, she would attend as herself, no apron, no mask. Still, a flicker of unease stirred in her chest. Adrian Cole would be there. She could already imagine the shock on his face when he realized the waitress he had mocked was the CEO he wanted to impress. The thought satisfied her, but it also reminded her of the sting she had swallowed. She didn't seek revenge, but she did believe in truth being revealed. Across the city, Adrian reclined in his leather chair, scrolling through his messages. The Harrison Foundation Gala was marked on his calendar, highlighted in bold. For Adrian, these nights were opportunities to showcase dominance, to remind competitors why his name carried weight. He thrived in these settings, where subtle smirks and cutting words won more than contract. He poured himself another drink, leaning back, yet his thoughts drifted, uninvited, to the waitress. He remembered the firmness in her voice when she had taken their order, the steadiness in her eyes when their laughter cut deepest. Most people in her position would have flushed or stumbled. She hadn't. Something about it lingered, irritating like a grain of sand. He shook it off, muttering. Emily, meanwhile, prepared differently. Her days at the cafe continued, her disguise unbroken, her mask as steady as ever. By night, she reviewed reports and negotiated contracts with the same precision she always had. Rivera Industries was preparing for an expansion into sustainable housing projects, a vision she believed could change the city. But she also knew men like Adrian would circle, seeing only profit, not purpose. That contrast was why she wore her dual lives so carefully. She needed the cafe not just as a disguise, but as a reminder. It grounded her, reminding her what real struggle looked like, what dignity under pressure meant. Without it, she feared she would become like the very people she tested, shallow, blind to those beneath them. The night before the gala, she stood in front of her mirror. Gone was the tired waitress in a faded apron. Instead, she wore a gown of midnight silk, simple but commanding. Her hair fell in waves, her eyes lined just enough to highlight their depth. She studied her reflection, seeing not vanity but strength. Tomorrow, the world and Adrian Cole would see her without Adrian received his own preparations with the ease of routine. A new suit, tailored to perfection, cufflinks polished, his name already listed among the expected keynote attendees. To him, the gala was a stage where he would remind others that Adrian Cole played to win. He had no idea the stage was set for his pride to unravel. And so, fate drew its lines. Emily Rivera, the hidden CEO, ready to step out from behind her mask. Adrian Cole, the ruthless millionaire, blind to the truth awaiting him. Both unaware that the gala would not only reveal identities, but set in motion of worlds neither could walk away from unchanged. The Harrison Foundation Gala was the kind of event designed to impress. Crystal chandeliers glittered above the ballroom, sending fractured light across polished marble floors. Waiters in white gloves moved silently through the crowd. Trays of champagne flutes balanced like jewels in their hands. The air buzzed with laughter, with whispered deals disguised as small talk, with the confidence of men and women who believed themselves untouchable. Adrian Cole arrived late enough to be noticed but not scorned. His timing was deliberate, his stride purposeful, his smile a weapon polished through years of practice. Heads turned as he entered, his tailored suit cutting a striking silhouette beneath the chandeliers. He scanned the room quickly, calculating who held influence, who was weak, who could be maneuvered. These nights were his hunting ground. He moved with ease through the first clusters of guests, exchanging firm handshakes, accepting compliments with smug nods. Investors greeted him warmly, rivals warily, but all acknowledged him. He thrived on that acknowledgement, the unspoken power that followed his name. At the far end of the ballroom, music swelled. conversations dimmed as heads turned. The entrance of Rivera Industries' elusive CEO had been whispered about all evening. Few had seen her publicly, fewer still knew what to expect. Rumors painted her as brilliant, elusive, untouchable. And then Emily Rivera appeared. She descended the grand staircase with measured grace, her gown a river of midnight silk that shimmered with each step. Diamonds sparkled at her ears, but it was her composure that stole the breath of the room. Her gaze was steady, her shoulders squared, her smile faint but unyielding. She walked as though the world bowed to her, yet she bowed to nothing. Adrian's glass stilled halfway to his lips. His eyes locked on her and the air seemed to thin. Recognition struck like a thunderclap. The waitress, the woman in the faded apron, mocked for her clothes, dismissed with cruel laughter. Here she stood now, not in worn shoes, but in heels that clicked like thunder across marble, not with coffee stains, but with elegance that commanded silence. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole faltered. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd as Emily reached the floor, greeting dignitaries with poised handshakes. People leaned in, murmuring, "That's her, Rivera, the CEO." Eyes darted toward Adrian, already piecing together the irony. The man known for spotting weakness had mocked a woman who now stood as his equal, no, his superior. Emily's gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on Adrian. Her eyes gave nothing away, calm as still water. But the faint curve of her lips, polite, detached, cut sharper than any blade. Adrian forced his body into motion, crossing the room toward her. He rehearsed excuses in his mind, lines that might soften the blow of recognition. But when he reached her, all he managed was a stiff, "Miss Rivera." "An honor." Emily inclined her head slightly. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was smooth, even, yet beneath it was steel. "I trust you found your coffee satisfactory this week?" The words landed with precision, a subtle reminder delivered in front of half the room, yet veiled enough to seem innocent. Adrian's face flushed, though he masked it with a tight smile. "Course," he said, clearing his throat. "Forgive me. I didn't realize I was more than what you assumed." Emily finished softly, her eyes holding his. For a heartbeat, silence hummed between them, louder than the music. Then she turned gracefully to greet another guest, dismissing him without dismissal, leaving him standing in the wake of her quiet power. Whispers swelled around them. Guests exchanged knowing looks, savoring the delicious ironies. Adrian Cole, the ruthless investor, undone not by failure but by arrogance. He forced himself to circulate, to shake hands, to smile, but his thoughts kept circling back to her gown, her calm voice, her subtle strike, and worst of all, to the undeniable truth that he had underestimated her completely. For the rest of the evening, he felt the cracks spreading across his carefully crafted image. Adrian Cole had weathered brutal negotiations and hostile takeovers, but nothing felt as suffocating as the ballroom that night. Every conversation he joined seemed tinged with unspoken amusement, every handshake carrying the faintest curl of a smile. The story had already spread. Adrian Cole mocking a waitress, only to find she was Emily Rivera, the CEO whose approval could make or break fortune. He tried to shake it off, drowning himself in a glass of scotch. Yet his mind betrayed him, replaying that morning at Harper's Cafe. Her blouse had been worn, her apron faded, but her eyes, those eyes were the same as tonight, steady, calm, quietly unshaken, even when he had tried to cut her down. He had mistaken restraint for weakness. Now he understood it, had been strength. From across the room, he watched her. Emily moved effortlessly among the city's elite, yet without arrogance. When she laughed, it was soft, genuine, never forced. When she listened, she leaned slightly forward, giving her full attention. Even rivals who once doubted her seemed drawn into her orbit. Adrian realized with something close to dread that her power was not just her title or wealth. It was her presence, and the contrast between who she was here and who she had been at the cafe made his mockery sting sharper. Later in the evening, fate forced them together once more. A senior partner from a hedge fund introduced Adrian to Emily with deliberate enthusiasm, eager to watch the sparks. "Two of the sharpest minds in the city," the man said with a grin. "Surely you've already met." Emily's smile was polite, briefly. Adrian straightened, forcing confidence into his tone. Yes, though I admit, I didn't quite see the full picture at first. Emily tilted her head, her gaze piercing. Few do. The partner laughed, oblivious to the tension. Well, I expect we'll see a great deal of collaboration between you two. Rivera Industries and Cole Holdings, now that would be something. Emily's lips curved, though her eyes never left Adrian. Perhaps, but partnerships require respect at their foundation, don't they, Mr. Cole? The partner chuckled, nodding in agreement before being called away. Adrian was left standing before her, stripped of his usual composure. He wanted to apologize, to explain, but the words tangled in his throat. Emily, sensing his struggle, gave a graceful nod and turned away once. The rest of the night, Adrian's armor continued to crumble. Guests whispered behind champagne flutes, and though none confronted him directly, the humiliation burned hotter than any open insult. His pride, carefully built over years of ruthless victories, now seemed fragile in the face of a single woman's quiet rebuke. Emily, meanwhile, carried herself as though the entire episode had barely grazed her, but inside, she felt the sting of that cafe moment still. She had chosen to face the mockery without revealing her identity then, yet seeing Adrian again reminded her how easily people judged by appearances. It wasn't revenge she sought tonight, it was affirmation. And judging by the way his gaze faltered each time it met hers, affirmation had already been achieved. As the evening drew to a close, Emily stepped onto the balcony for a moment of air. The city stretched below, glittering in the night. She leaned against the railing, savoring the cool breeze against her skin. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Adrian approached slowly, his usual confidence replaced by something heavier. "Miss Rivera," he said, his voice low. She turned, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole?" For a moment, silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the city. Then Adrian exhaled. "About the cafe, I was cruel," Emily finished softly. His jaw tightened. Yes, and wrong. He looked down briefly, then back at her. "I've prided myself on reading people, on seeing through them. But with you, I saw nothing. Or worse, I saw what I wanted to see." Emily's gaze remained steady. "You saw fabric and scenes. You saw what you thought was weakness. That says more about you than about me." Adrian winced. For once, he had no clever retort, no calculated deflection. "You're right," he admitted, the words foreign on his tongue. Emily studied him for a long moment. There was no triumph in her eyes, no cruelty. Only calm, the same calm she had shown that morning when she'd taken their orders in silence. Finally, she inclined her head. "Good night, Mr. Cole." She left him standing on the balcony, the city roaring beneath, the weight of his arrogance pressing down on him harder than any business loss ever had. Inside, guests whispered and laughed, the irony of the evening sealed into their memories. But Adrian felt none of it. For the first time, his carefully crafted image had cracked, and it was Emily Rivera, the woman he had mocked as a waitress, who had struck the blow. The morning after the gala, bouquets began arriving at Emily Rivera's office. Orchids in crystal vases, roses in gold-wrapped boxes, even rare lilies flown in overnight. Each one bore the same card, scrawled in Adrian Cole's sharp handwriting, "I owe you an apology." Her assistant raised an eyebrow, as yet another delivery man wheeled in an extravagant arrangement. "You're single-handedly keeping the city's florists in business, you Rivera." Emily smiled faintly, though her eyes remained cool. "Send them to the hospital down the street. The children's ward could use the color." By the third day, the gifts escalated. A vintage fountain pen, a silk scarf, even a rare book she had once mentioned in passing during a charity interview years ago. Adrian had clearly done his research, yet Emily remained unmoved. She did not return the calls, nor reply to the carefully worded emails that followed. She had no intention of being won over by extravagance. In truth, she wasn't sure what unsettled her more, his arrogance at the cafe, or the humility he seemed to be fumbling toward now. It was easy to dismiss a man who marked you. Harder, perhaps, to ignore a man who tried to make amends. Their paths inevitably crossed again, this time in a boardroom. Rivera Industries had been approached for a joint development project in sustainable housing, and Adrian Cole's firm was among the bidders. The irony was not lost on Emily when she walked into the sleek conference room and found him seated at the head of the table, his dark eyes already fixed on her. He rose politely, a gesture that surprised many of the other executives. "Ms. Rivera?" he greeted, his voice measured. "Mr. Cole," she replied, her tone even. The meeting began, charts and figures projected onto screens, advisors speaking in rehearsed pitches. Adrian, however, dominated the discussion, pushing aggressively for his proposal. He spoke of profits, of market share, of how quickly the project could expand with his backing. His voice was persuasive, his confidence undeniable. When he finished, silence followed, until Emily leaned forward, her hands folded calmly. "You speak of speed," she said evenly, "but speed without stability collapses. You speak of profit, but profit without integrity poisons communities. This project is not about how quickly we can grow numbers. It is about how well we can build lives." Murmurs rippled through the room. Adrian's jaw tightened. For years, few had dared to challenge him so directly. But Emily's gaze did not waver. She countered each of his points with precision, not hostility, her calm control exposing the flaws in his aggressiveness. Adrian felt a strange mix of frustration and fascination. He was used to opponents folding beneath pressure, yet she held her ground with ease, as though his force rolled off her like waves against stone. The meeting stretched late into the evening, neither side conceding, both locked in a battle of wills. And beneath the clash of figures and philosophies, another current simmered, unspoken, electric. Adrian caught himself studying the curve of her jaw when she tilted her head, the quiet fire in her eyes when she spoke of dignity. He admired her, not just for her intelligence, but for her refusal to bend, even under the weight of his presence. It was infuriating. And intoxicating. Emily, for her part, felt the heat of his gaze, though she refused to acknowledge it. She told herself it was strategy, another attempt to unnerve her. Yet a flicker of something deeper unsettled her, the memory of how easily he had dismissed her, and the possibility that he now looked at her differently. When the meeting adjourned, the tension followed them into the hallway. Adrian fell into step beside her. "You dismantled my entire pick," he said finally, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You left gaps," she replied coolly. "I filled them." He chuckled, surprising her. "I don't often lose ground in a room like that." "Perhaps that's because no one has been willing to challenge you." Their eyes met then, a silent clash of pride and something else neither wanted to name. For a moment, the busy hallway faded, leaving only the charged space between them. That night, Emily lingered in her office long after the others had gone. The city glittered through the tall windows, but her mind replayed every word of the meeting. Adrian's forceful tone, his relentless push for control, and yet, beneath it, his willingness to listen when she spoke. He hadn't interrupted her, not once. For a man known to dominate every room, his restraint unsettled her more than his arrogance ever had. She rubbed her temples, reminding herself not to be swayed. Men like Adrian Cole thrived on manipulation. Still, she couldn't deny the flurgur of admiration she had felt, even as she tore his pitch apart. His determination was reckless, but his intelligence was sharp. He was, in his own way, formidable. Across the city, Adrian sat in his penthouse, drink in hand, the skyline stretched endlessly before him. He should have been irritated by the meeting's outcome, furious even, but instead he felt something different. He replayed her voice, calm and deliberate, dismantling every weak point of his proposal. He saw again the way her eyes held his without flinching. For years, people had deferred to him, bowed under his weight. Emily Rivera had not, and he found himself drawn to it. The following week, their paths crossed again at a charity luncheon. Adrian arrived with his usual entourage of investors, but when he saw Emily across the room, his focus shifted. She was dressed simply compared to the jeweled guests, yet she commanded more attention than any of them. He approached cautiously, offering a polite smile. "Philip Rivera," he greeted, inclining his head. "Mr. Cole," she replied, her tone even but cool. "I owe you another apology," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Her brows lifted faintly. "You've sent flowers, books, even a scarf. I assume this one doesn't come with a gift?" He shook his head. "No gifts, just words. And I know they may not mean much, but I was wrong. Not just that morning, but in how I've lived. I've mistaken power for value." Emily studied him, searching for insincerity, but his expression was steady, almost raw. For a fleeting moment, she believed him. Yet caution tightened her voice. "Words are easy, Mr. Cole. Change is not." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll prove it." Before she could respond, they were pulled into separate conversations. Yet his words lingered, threading through her thoughts long after the luncheon ended. Days later, Rivera Industries hosted another negotiation round for the housing project. Adrian attended again, this time quieter, less forceful. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did, his tone was measured. Emily noticed, though she did not let him see. She countered his points as sharply as before, but part of her wondered if his restraint was genuine or strategy. The tension between them grew with each encounter. In the boardroom, they clashed over numbers and philosophies, each unwilling to yield. But outside those walls, moments flickered, where pride gave way to something unspoken. A glance held too long, a silence heavy with what neither dared admit. One evening, after a particularly heated exchange, Adrian walked Emily to her car. Rain had just begun to fall, soft drops tapping against the pavement. For a moment, they stood in the glow of the streetlight, the city hushed around them. "You infuriate me," Adrian said finally, his voice low. Emily's lips curved faintly. "Good. Then perhaps you'll remember I'm not someone to dismiss." He stepped closer, his gaze burning. "Dismissing you is the last thing I could ever do." The air thickened, their pride clashing with the pull between them. Emily drew in a breath, steadying herself. "Careful, Mr. Cole. Some storms aren't meant to be chased." She slipped into her car before he could answer, leaving him standing in the rain, torn between frustration and desire. Back in her penthouse, Emily leaned against the door, her heart racing. She told herself it was nothing, just the echo of tension, just another collision of two stubborn wills. But as she closed her eyes, she knew the truth. Beneath the mistrust, something undeniable was growing, a spark neither of them could extinguish. Emily Rivera had always worn composure like armor. In the boardroom, at the cafe, even under the chandeliers of a gala, her calm voice and steady eyes rarely cracked. But sometimes, late at night, she remembered the academy her father had insisted she attend as a teenager, an elite school where wealth gleamed in every polished shoe and whispered insult. She had arrived in a uniform her mother had tailored by hand, slightly off the pristine standard. By lunch, whispers followed her. "Rivera's girl can't even afford the right cut." Boys laughed at her shoes, girls mocked her hair. Even when she grew into her name, when Rivera Industries became synonymous with rising power, the sting of those years clung like smoke. Memory seared sharper than the rest. A classmate's birthday party, a sprawling mansion filled with chandeliers. Emily had worn her best dress, modest, carefully pressed. A group of wealthy girls circled her, smiling with venom. "You don't belong here," one whispered. "Money doesn't buy class." The humiliation had burned so deep that even years later, standing in her penthouse, Emily sometimes felt that girl still inside her. It was why she hid in plain sight, why she tied aprons around herself, why she tested people before trusting them. She needed to know who could see worth without labels, because too many had proven they could not. Across the city, Adrian Cole nursed his own ghosts. His family name had once been carved into skyscrapers, his father a titan of finance, but greed had hollowed the empire from within. A betrayal by his father's closest partner shattered everything, dragging the Coles through scandal and ruin. Adrian had been young, old enough to understand humiliation but too powerless to stop it. He had watched as his mother sold heirlooms to keep their home, as friends vanished overnight, as his father's face appeared on front pages smeared with disgrace. From the rubble, Adrian rebuilt himself. He clawed back wealth with ruthless precision, swearing never again to be blindsided by trust. Deals became wars, partnerships battles. If he hardened, it was survival. Better to be feared than pitied. better to cut before being cut. But Emily Rivera complicated that creed. She wasn't just beautiful or intelligent. She unsettled him because she saw through him, past the armor of charm and arrogance, into the boy who had once lost everything. One evening, searching for her after another tense negotiation, Adrian found Emily not in her tower or behind a boardroom table, but in the quiet back room of a shelter. She wore simple clothes, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair pulled back. No cameras, no spotlight. She handed bowls of soup to weary hands, her smile gentle, her touch steady on a child's shoulder. Adrian lingered in the doorway, unseen for a moment, watching her laugh softly with a little girl clutching a worn teddy bear twisted something inside him. She wasn't here for image or applause. She was here because she cared. When she finally noticed him, surprise flickered in her eyes, quickly replaced by guarded calm. "Mr. Cole," she said softly. He stepped closer, his voice lower than usual. "You could be at any gala in the city, and you're here." And her gaze held his steadily. "This matters more?" He had no reply. The world he lived in measured value by profit margins. Seeing her here, stripped of pretense, made him question the emptiness of his own victories. But admiration tangled with tension, and soon the storm returned. At the next joint meeting about the housing project, Adri presented a revised plan. His numbers were sharp, his arguments persuasive, but buried within was a clause that shifted risk to smaller partners, squeezing them for his firm's gain. It was standard practice in his world, survival of the fittest, the strong taking more. Emily caught it instantly. Her pen tapped once against the page before she lifted her eyes, calm but fiery. "Mr. Cole, this clause undermines the very people we claim to serve. Smaller firms will collapse under its weight." Adrian leaned back, unbothered. "Business rewards strength. If they can't withstand pressure, they shouldn't be in the game." Her voice sharpened, though it never rose. "This project isn't a game. These partners are builders, families, communities. Exploiting them isn't strategy, it's cruelty." The room stilled. Executives glanced between them, sensing the clash. Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's how I built my empire, by never carrying the weak." Emily leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Then perhaps it's not as strong as you believe. An empire built on broken backs eventually crumbles. I've seen it." The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Adrian's pride flared, but beneath it, her words pierced deeper than he wanted to admit. Memories of his father's empire collapsing clawed back. The betrayal, the ruin, the truth that arrogance had blinded them until it was too late. For the first time, Adrian faltered in a boardroom, not because of numbers, but because a woman named Emily Rivera had dared to hold a mirror to his methods. And though sparks of admiration burned hotter, so too did the rift widening between them. The meeting ended in tense silence, the executives dispersing with uneasy glances. Adrian remained seated, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the table. Emily gathered her notes with steady movements, but her heart thudded. She had faced ruthless businessmen before, but confronting Adrian felt different, more dangerous, more personal. As she turned to leave, his voice broke the quiet. "You think I'm cruel?" She paused, her back still to him. "I think you've confused survival with strength." His laugh was hollow. "Easy to say when you've never lost everything." Emily turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "You're wrong. I know what it feels like to be torn down for not being enough. To have people mock what you wear, where you come from, as if worth is something stitched into fabric. That's why I refuse to build anything that repeats that cruelty." Adrian's eyes flickered, his mask cracking for a moment, but pride held him silent. Emily left the room, her footsteps echoing, the distance between them widening with every step. That night, Emily sat in her penthouse, staring at the city lights. Her memories pressed hard, the girls who had laughed at her, dress, the whispers that had once haunted her. She had turned those wounds into steel, but the scars still throbbed. She feared that trusting a man like Adrian would only reopen them. Meanwhile, Adrian paced his own penthouse, glass in hand. Emily's words clung to him like chains. An empire built on broken backs eventually crumbles. He knew she was right because he had lived through it. He remembered his father's downfall, the shame of watching everything collapse. He had sworn never to be weak, never to trust. Yet here she was, daring him to consider that maybe his strength was just fear in disguise. Days later, he sought her out. He didn't announce his visit to Rivera Tower. He simply appeared at her office uninvited. Emily looked up, her expression guarded. "Mr. Cole," she said evenly, "I wasn't expecting you." "I needed to see you," he admitted. "Not as a rival, not as a negotiator, just as a man trying to understand how you do it." She raised a brow. "Do what?" "Stand there, calm, when people try to tear you down. Choose compassion when cruelty is easier. Believe in people when the world teaches you not to." His voice roughened. "I don't understand it, but I can't stop thinking about it." Emily's chest tightened. For a moment, she saw not the ruthless millionaire, but the boy scarred by betrayal. Yet caution reined her in. "Understanding doesn't come overnight, Mr. Cole, and kindness isn't weakness. Until you believe that, we'll never see eye to eye." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he gave a faint nod and left quietly, a gesture so unlike him it left her unsettled. The following weekend, fate placed them together again. Emily volunteered at the shelter, serving food and helping children with homework. When she stepped into the courtyard, she found Adrian there, shrugging out supplies with a focus that surprised her. "You don't belong here," she said softly, approaching him. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I wanted to try." For hours they worked side by side. Adrian was clumsy at first, but genuine. Emily watched him kneel to tie a child's shoelaces, his large hands awkward but careful. Something shifted in her chest, though she tried to ignore it. Later, as they cleaned up, he caught her gaze. "You were right," he said quietly. "This matters more." For a heartbeat, the walls between them thinned. But the next week, at another meeting, they clashed again. Adrian proposed cutting corners to speed construction, risking safety. Emily's fury ignited, her voice sharp as steel. "I won't allow it," she said firmly. "Not one more life compromised for numbers." Their eyes locked, pride and passion colliding. Sparks burned between them, not just of anger, but of something neither dared name. And when Emily walked out, Adrian remained behind, torn apart. For the first time in years, he didn't know if he wanted to win against her or win her trust. The story broke on a Monday morning, splashed across the front page of every business journal and gossip column in the city. CEO pretends to be Waitress, Rivera's double life exposed. The article spread like wildfire. Photos of Emily in her cafe uniform circulated online, side by side with glamorous shots of her in evening gowns at galas. Commentators feasted on the irony, framing her disguise as deception. "Would a CEO play Waitress?" one headline sneered. "What else is she hiding?" Emily sat in her office, staring at the screen. The words blurred, but the sting was sharp and clear. Her disguise, her secret, the quiet experiment she had used to test people's character, twisted now into a scandal. Her assistant entered hesitantly. "Miss Rivera, the phones won't stop ringing. Reporters are at the front desk." Emily nodded, her composure tight though her chest ached. "Cancel everything for today. No interviews." But hiding did little. By noon, the internet buzzed with ridicule. Clips replayed her walking through the cafe, customers mocking her apron, spliced with commentary that called her deceitful. Strangers questioned her credibility. Investors demanded answers. The same people who had once admired her humility now twisted it into weakness. At the cafe, Harper called in a panic. "Emily, they're outside, cameras everywhere. They're asking why you lied." The staff's scared. Emily closed her eyes. "Tell them I'll address it soon, and keep the staff safe. This isn't on them." Her phone vibrated again and again. Colleagues, journalists, even former classmates sending messages that reopened old wounds. "So you were pretending all along? Guess you never belonged in either world." She fought to keep her mask steady, but when she finally left her office, flashes blinded her. Paparazzi crowded the sidewalk, shouting questions. Why did you lie, Miss Rivera? Was it a publicity stunt? Were you mocking working class? The words cut deep. Of all accusations, that one hurt most. She had lived their life, walked in their shoes, not as mockery, but as respect. Yet the world twisted her choice into a cruel game. That evening, Emily returned to her penthouse alone. She stood on the balcony, staring at the city. Rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then harder, blurring the skyline. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of defeat pressing down, heavier than any insult at the cafe. Meanwhile, Adrian Cole watched the chaos unfold. His rivals were already celebrating. One competitor smirked in a televised interview. Rivera's stunt proves she doesn't take leadership seriously. Playing Waitress isn't vision, it's deception. Adrian clenched his jaw. He had mocked Emily once himself, dismissed her, humiliated her. But seeing the world tear her down now ignited something in him. Fury, not at her, but at the cruelty. The next day, Rivera Industries' stock dipped, the scandal trending worldwide. Emily prepared to face her board, her calm mask slipping only when she caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked like the girl at the academy again, the one who had been told she didn't belong. But when the boardroom doors opened, it wasn't her turn to speak first. It was Adrian Cole. He stood at the podium of a packed press conference, cameras flashing wildly. No one had expected him there, least of all Emily, who froze when she saw the live feed on her office screen. "I've heard the headlines," Adrian began, his voice steady, firm. "They say Emily Rivera pretended to be someone she's not, that she deceived the public, that working as a waitress made her less of a leader. I am here to say the opposite." Reporters murmured, stunned. "Emily Rivera chose to walk in humility," he continued, his eyes burning with conviction. "She tested people not to mock them, but to understand them. While the rest of us measured power and profit, she measured it in character. I know, because I failed that test once. I mocked her, dismissed her, and I was wrong. But she never broke. That is the kind of strength this world needs." His words spread like wildfire. Clips of his speech cut through the scandal, reshaping the narrative. Emily watched, her breath caught, as Adrian Cole, ruthless, prideful, feared, stood vulnerable before the world, defending her when no one else would. For the first time since the story broke, hope flickered in her chest. The press conference went viral before it even ended. Within hours, clips of Adrian Cole's defense flooded every platform. His words, raw, uncharacteristic, even self-criminating, shocked the public. This was not the sharp-tongued investor tearing rivals apart. This was a man admitting failure, acknowledging a woman's strength in a way that made headlines bend in her favor. Adrian Cole defends Rivera. She measured strength in character, not profit. Waitress or CEO? Both, and that's why she's brilliant. The internet, fickle and fast, began to shift. Hashtags bloomed across feeds. The real Rivera? She appeared seamlessly in the shadows. Former employees of Rivera Institute of Sheeb? She never broke. Strangers posted clips of Emily at the cafe, admiring her calm. Former employees of Rivera Industries shared stories of her quiet generosity, scores she had paid in secret. For the first time since the scandal broke, the tide turned. Emily, watching from her office, felt her throat tighten. She hadn't asked Adrian to defend her. She hadn't trusted him enough to believe he would. And yet, there he was, standing before the world, using his own reputation to shield hers. When they finally met after the conference, the air between them was taut with unspoken emotion. Adrian entered her office without preamble, rain still dampening his shoulders. She stood by the window, arms folded. "You had no right," she said softly, though her voice trembled. His brow furrowed. "No right to what? To tell the truth?" "Speak for me," she replied, turning to face him. Her eyes glistened, but her expression was fierce. "I've spent my life fighting to be seen on my own terms. And you walk into a press conference and decide you'll be my savior?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It wasn't about saving you. It was about admitting I was wrong. About showing the world what you showed me. That strength isn't arrogance, it's resilience." Her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice, but old wounds made her wary. "And if tomorrow they turn on you, if your rivals use this against you?" He stepped closer, his voice lower, rougher. Then let them. For once in my life, I'd rather lose everything than stay silent when you're being torn apart. The room stilled. Emily's composure cracked, a tear slipping down her cheek. She turned away quickly, brushing it aside. "You're impossible," she whispered. "You're unforgettable," he answered. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city buzzed outside, cameras still flashing, headlines still spinning. But inside that office, the world felt narrowed to two people standing on opposite sides of a line drawn by pride and pain. That night, Emily walked through the cafe again. The cameras had thinned, the frenzy dimmed, but a few loyal customers remained, clapping quietly when she entered. Harper hugged her fiercely, whispering, "They see you now, Emily, the real you." Emily smiled faintly, her chest swelling with something she hadn't let herself feel in days: relief. By morning, the internet had rewritten the narrative entirely. News anchors praised her humility, commentators applauded Adrian's honesty. For the first time, Emily's disguise was not a scandal, but a story of vision, of a CEO who had walked in the shoes of her employees, not to mock, but to understand. And though the world's admiration steadied her, it was Adrian's loyalty that lingered deepest. She still didn't know if she could trust him fully. But for the first time, she wondered if perhaps his walls, like hers, were beginning to crack. The storm that had nearly destroyed Emily's reputation shifted into something unexpected. Weeks after Adrian's public defense, the headlines calmed, the fury quieted, and a new image of Emily Rivera settled in the public's mind. A CEO who chose humility, who tested character by blending with the people she led. But Adrian's transformation was just beginning. For years, his company had operated like a machine, efficient, ruthless, profits placed above people. He had ruled with fear, expecting obedience, rewarding only results. But now, as he walked the halls of Cole Strategic Holdings, he noticed things differently. The nervous glances of assistants when he passed, the silence at the elevator, no small talk, no smiles. He saw not respect, but fear, and for the first time it unsettled him. At a Monday morning meeting, he addressed his senior staff. His tone, still commanding, carried something new. "From this point forward," he said, "I want transparency. No more cutting corners at the expense of partners. No more squeezing the smallest players because we can. If anyone here thinks weakness deserves punishment, they can leave." The room was stunned. Adrian Cole, the man who had once built his empire on ruthlessness, was redrawing the rules. His rivals laughed when word reached them. "He's gone soft," one competitor sneered on a broadcast. "Defending Rivera has dulled his edge." But Adrian didn't flinch. He stood in meetings with those same rivals and cut through their corruption with a sharpness they hadn't expected. Not cruelty, but clarity. He rejected underhanded deals, exposed hidden clauses, and for the first time his strength came not from intimidation, but from integrity. Emily noticed. Reports of Adrian's shifts trickled back to her, quiet acknowledgments from smaller firms that had been spared, staff who whispered that their boss seemed different. She wanted to dismiss it as strategy, another performance. But the consistency unsettled her. Their paths crossed again at a joint panel on sustainable growth. Adrian sat across from her, his suit crisp, his voice calm as he spoke. "Growth means nothing if it leaves people broken behind it," he said. The words carried weight because they sounded lived, not rehearsed. Emily's chest tightened. When their eyes met across the table, his gaze held no arrogance, no mockery, only truth. But trust did not come easily. That evening, she confronted him in the hallway outside the... "You're changing," she said carefully, her tone edged with suspicion. He inclined his head. "I'm trying." She crossed her arms. "Why? To win my approval? To ease your guilt?" His jaw flexed, but his voice remained steady. "Because I was wrong. About you, about leadership, about myself. I spent years building walls out of fear. I thought fear made me strong. You showed me it made me blind." Her heart ached at the rawness in his words, but old wounds made her wary. "Words again, Adrian, always words." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then test me again, put me in the storm, and see if I stand." That test came sooner than either expected. A storm thundered across the city one night, lightning tearing the sky as Emily left a late board session. The rain drenched the streets, taxis scarce. Adrian appeared suddenly, his car pulling to the curb. She hesitated, then accepted his silent offer. The drive was quiet, rain hammering the windows, until tension finally broke. "Do you really still don't trust me?" Adrian said, his voice rough. Emily turned to him, rain-slick streaks flashing in her eyes. "Trust isn't given, Adrian. It's earned. And you broke it the moment you laughed at me like I was nothing." His hands tightened on the wheel. "I know, and I've regretted it every day since, but understand this, it wasn't your fortune that silenced me at that gala. It wasn't your title, it was you. The woman who endured mockery without breaking. The woman who stood calm when the world tried to tear her down. That's who I admire. Not Rivera Industries CEO, not the heiress in silk gowns, just—" Her breath caught, the words striking deeper than she expected. The car slowed as he pulled into her building's drive. Rain still pounded, a storm wrapping the city in fury. Emily turned toward him, her voice trembling. "And if you fail me again? If this is just another mask?" He met her gaze, raw and unguarded. "Then, I'll spend the rest of my life proving you wrong." The storm outside surged, but inside the car, silence burned hotter. Their eyes locked, pride dissolving into something neither could deny, and when the first tear slid down her cheek, Adrian reached out, not with force but with care, his hand brushing it away. For the first time, Emily didn't pull back. The storm raged heavier as Emily stepped out of the car, but Adrian followed, unwilling to let the moment end. Rain slicked the pavement, street lamps glowing in blurred halos, yet neither cared about the cold or the water soaking through expensive clothes. They faced each other under the downpour, words drowned but hearts pounding. Emily's voice cracked as she shouted over the storm. "Do you even understand what you're asking me to risk? Trusting you means opening wounds I've spent years stitching closed. It means believing that the man who mocked me in front of strangers won't humiliate me again when it matters most." Adrian's eyes burned, his voice rough but steady. "I do understand, because trusting you means lowering walls I swore I'd never take down. It means admitting that fear has ruled my life, that arrogance was just armor to hide the boy who once lost everything. I don't want to live like that anymore, not when I've seen what strength really looks like in you." Her chest heaved, tears mingling with the rain. "And what if I can't forgive you? What if every time I look at you, I hear the laughter again?" He stepped closer, water streaming down his face, his expression raw. "Then I'll keep showing up. I'll keep standing here in the storm until you believe me. Because I don't admire your fortune, Emily. I don't admire the empire you built. I admire the woman who faced humiliation with calm eyes. The woman who refused to break when even I tried to tear her down. That's who you are to me." And that. The thunder cracked above them, but silence pulsed between their hearts. Emily searched his face, desperate for lies, for rehearsed charm, but all she saw was truth, jagged and imperfect, the kind of truth only pain could carve. Her resolve wavered, walls crumbling brick by brick. She wanted to resist, to protect herself, but the pull between them was undeniable. Pride and mistrust dissolved in the storm, leaving only two people stripped bare of titles, armor, and pretense. Adrian's hand lifted slowly, giving her the choice. She let out a shuddering breath and stepped into it, her forehead resting against his chest. His arms closed around her, fierce yet careful, as though holding something he never wanted to let go of. The kiss came not as a soft promise, but as a collision, raw, desperate, years of wounds meeting in a single spark. The rain poured harder, soaking them both, but neither pulled away. It was not perfection, it was surrender. When they finally parted, breathless, Emily whispered, "You'll have to prove this isn't just a storm's illusion." Adrian nodded, his forehead against hers. "Then let me spend every day proving it's real." The storm eased slowly, but their world had already shifted. For the first time, walls built from pride and pain cracked wide enough for something new to grow. Inside her building, Emily paused before stepping away. She looked back at Adrian, standing in the rain, his eyes locked on hers. For once, she didn't see arrogance, she saw redemption. fragile but burning bright. And though she wasn't ready to surrender completely, she knew one truth. The battle between them had changed. No longer rival against rival, no longer wounds against walls. Now it was two hearts daring to collide, each terrified but unwilling to walk away. A year passed, carrying with it storms and triumphs neither Emily Rivera nor Adrian Cole could have predicted. The scandal that once threatened to undo her had faded into legend, reshaped into a story of humility and resilience. Investors now lauded her as a visionary not only for her strategies but for her humanity. Adrian, once feared for his ruthless precision, was now respected for something he had never thought he'd be. Together, they built a partnership the city had not seen before. Not just romantic, but professional, a union of strength and balance. Rivera Industries expanded its outreach, funding programs that brought affordable housing to struggling families. Adrian's firm shifted too, redirecting millions into community initiatives that mirrored Emily's vision. He admitted with a crooked smile that she had infected him with conscience. Their relationship grew in tandem with their reputations. Nights once spent in boardrooms were now spent at dinners where conversation drifted from numbers to dreams. They disagreed still, fiercely at times, but each clash ended not with distance but with growth. Pride had once divided them, now it sharpened them, like steel against Emmer's Cafe, the place where everything had begun, stood transformed. Renovated with her own earnings, not Adrian's wealth, it was brighter, warmer, yet still carried the same scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee. Photographs of the staff lined the walls, alongside notes from patrons whose lives had been touched there. The cafe had become more than a business. It was a legacy, a reminder that humility was never weakness. One crisp autumn morning, Emily and Adrian walked hand in hand into the cafe. The staff greeted them warmly, Harper squeezing Emily tight as though no time had passed. Adrian chuckled when one of the waiters teased him, "Careful with the jokes. We all know who had the last laugh." Emily rolled her eyes but smiled. These walls held their beginning, the sting of mockery and the spark of change. Returning here wasn't just sentimental, it was grounding. That afternoon, fate repeated itself. A group of young professionals sat at a booth, their laughter loud, their eyes sharp as they looked at a new waitress. Her uniform hung loosely, her shoes scuffed. One leaned back, smirking. Couldn't they hire someone who knows how to... The others laughed, echoing cruelty Emily knew all too well. Before the girl could shrink under their words, Emily rose. She crossed the cafe with quiet authority, her heels clicking softly on the floor. The young waitress looked up, eyes wide, bracing for reprimand. Instead, Emily set a hand gently on her shoulder. Her voice carried through the room, calm yet unyielding. "Clothes don't measure worth," she said, her gaze sweeping the booth. "Respect does." The laughter died instantly. The young men shifted uncomfortably, their smirks faltering under the weight of her presence. The waitress's eyes filled with relief, her shoulders straightening as if Emily's words had stitched invincible armor around her. From across the room, Adrian watched, his chest tightening with quiet pride. He smiled, not the smirk of arrogance he once wore, but the kind of smile reserved for witnessing something sacred. Because those words, simple yet powerful, had been the seed of their story. And later, as the cafe settled back into its euphoric huff of chatter and clinking cups, Emily sat beside him at their corner table. He reached for her hand, threading his... "You know," he murmured, "I'll never forget the day you said those words with your eyes, even when you didn't speak them. When I marked you, when I thought I was above you." Emily squeezed his hand gently. "And now?" He leaned closer, his voice tender. "Now, I know I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that I see you. Not for gowns or titles, but for the woman who never broke." She rested her head against his shoulder, her smile soft. "Then maybe we've both learned the truth? That legacy isn't in wealth, but in the love and dignity we leave behind." Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside the cafe, time seemed to still. Their story, once born of mockery and pride, now stood as a testament to courage, humility, and love that had weathered storms. The seasons turned, and the world adjusted to the new image of Emily Rivera and Adrian Cole. No longer opponents locked in rivalry, but partners reshaping what power looked like in their city. Together, they were a paradox that made headlines and inspired quiet whispers. The Waitress CEO who had once been mocked, and the ruthless millionaire who had once been feared, now standing side by side, proving that dignity could soften steel and love could. At Rivera Industries, Emily's leadership blossomed into something larger than profit. She established scholarship programs for underprivileged youth, invested in renewable housing that gave families security, and created mentorship pipelines for women who once believed they didn't belong. In boardrooms, she walked into every project with the same calm strength she had once carried in a cafe apron, reminding her team daily that humility was not weakness, but clarity. Adrian, inspired by her example, made his own changes. Cole Strategic Holdings began funding community initiatives, health clinics, literacy centers, even shelters where Emily had once volunteered. His staff noticed the difference first. The sharp edge of fear that had once haunted the halls of his offices eased into respect. He still demanded excellence, but now he offered something in return: loyalty, fairness, and acknowledgement. The press noted the shift. Commentators marveled at Adrian's transformation, attributing it to Emily's influence. He never denied it. "She showed me strength isn't measured in dominance," he told one interviewer. "It's measured in who stands steady when the world tries to break them." Emily, too, acknowledged the growth. But privately, she knew it wasn't about her changing him. It was about him choosing to change. That choice, more than his defenses or his gifts, was what began to heal her mistrust. Their personal life grew quietly. They didn't flaunt their relationship at galas or in interviews. Instead, they built rituals. Late-night walks through the city, coffee at the cafe corner table, evenings spent reviewing reports, side by side, until laughter overtook the spreadsheets. Their love wasn't about grand gestures, but about constancy. Yet the cafe remained their anchor. It was there, 1 year after Adrian's public defense, that their story reached its most poignant circle. The cafe bustled on a bright spring afternoon, sunlight spilling through spotless windows. Families gathered for lunch, students studied in corners, and Emily oversaw it all with pride. She still wore her apron sometimes, though no one expected her to. For her, it was a reminder of where she began, of who she had always been. Adrian arrived, pausing at the door, as he always did, letting his gaze sweep over the place that had changed his life. The staff greeted him warmly, no longer intimidated, but fond. He crossed the room to join Emily at their table. That was when it happened. A young waitress, new to the staff, delivered coffee to a table of well-dressed men. One looked her up and down, sneering. "You'd think the owner could afford proper uniforms. This looks cheap." The words were sharp, cruel in their familiarity. The girl flushed, fumbling with the tray. Emily stood immediately, her heels soft against the wood floor as she crossed to the booth. The cafe hushed, all eyes following her. She set her hand gently on the waitress's shoulder, her gaze steady on the men. "Plainties don't measure worth," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Respect does, and here we measure everyone the same." Silence filled the cafe. The men shifted uncomfortably under the weight of her words, their arrogance deflating. The waitress straightened slowly, her eyes wide with gratitude, shoulders no longer hunched. Emily gave her a reassuring nod before returning to her table. Adrian's smile met her as she sat. "You've come full circle," he murmured. She exhaled softly, her eyes glistening. "Maybe we both have." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe wrapping around them. Adrian reached for her hand, holding it with quiet reverence. "If I live to be 100, I'll never forget the first time I saw you, like this. Calm, steady, unbreakable. You changed everything for me, Emily. Not your wealth, not your power, just—" Her fingers tightened around his. "And you proved that people can change, even when the world says they can't. That's our legacy, Adrian. Not the companies, not the headlines, but the truth we chose to live." Outside, the city pulsed on. Inside the cafe, their story closed the circle it had begun. Mocked apron to unshakable dignity, ruthless pride to humbled devotion. Their love, born of wounds and storms, now stood as a testament that true worth cannot be stitched into clothes, written into titles, or measured in fortune. It lived in calm under fire, in courage against cruelty, in love that dared to heal what pride once broke.